Hello everyone, I'm Mandy Lockley and welcome to On Purpose Astrology. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about the solstice. So what is a solstice? Well, on the 21st of December in sort of America in the West and the 22nd in Europe and the East, we will be celebrating in the Northern Hemisphere the winter solstice. That means that on the winter solstice, it is the shortest day and the longest night. And after the winter solstice, the days get longer. So the kind of sun starts to return. And that's important spiritually and metaphorically. And I'll talk about that in a second. If you're in the southern hemisphere, you will be having the opposite. You will be having your summer solstice. So you'll be having your longest day. You will be having the sun having the longest period in the sky. Now, depending on the extremes of where you are, how far you are from the equator, with the winter solstice, if you're in the northern hemisphere, the further you are to the poles, to the Arctic Circle, you will be having less sun. In some cases, if you're really far north, you will be having no sun at all, which is really interesting, isn't it? If you were in the far southern hemisphere at the moment, if you just happen to be in Antarctica, which is unlikely, I guess, but you will be having your summer solstice, which means that you will have perpetual daylight. And again, that's reversed. So what about this winter solstice? I'll be talking about it as the winter solstice, but please remember I'm also referring to the summer solstice as well in terms of the astrological things. When I look at the chart applies, the aspects in the chart apply to wherever you are in the world. So the solstice is a time where we have been seeing shorter days. We've been seeing less of the sun. It's winter in the Northern Hemisphere. So it's dark. There are things looking as if they're dying, but they're not. They are just resting and renewing. As I look out of my window here, as I'm recording this, I can see the trees in my garden and the gardens beyond mine. I live in London, are bare. There are no leaves on the trees. There's no fruits or flowers or blossoms on the trees. So the solstice shows us that things have retracted. Things have looked as if they're dying, but really they've just kind of gone into themselves. They're resting, as I said, they're renewing, they're recuperating, they're storing. You know, the animals who hibernate in the winter are resting and restoring and getting themselves fed so that when they can, you know, they're fed themselves so that they can last the winter, so that when spring comes, they can have a rebirth and they can literally give birth as well. Anyway, so why is it spiritually important, the solstice? Well, just after the winter solstice, the sun starts to make a comeback. The days start to get longer. It might just be a minute or 2 minutes a day, but generally we see the sun starting to come back and the days getting longer. So this is the promise of the rebirth of the sun, the return of the sun, the return of life, the return of hope, the return of growth, which comes to peak fruition really in the spring, where we have the equinox. We have 2 equinoxes a year where day and night are of equal length. So spiritually, it's an important time to celebrate the fact that the sun is returning, the fact that we have hope, the fact that the world turns, the fact that the seasons turn. So it's not surprising that it's related to many religious festivals. For example, like Christmas. It's Yule as well, which is the sort of, you know, the more pagan sort of version of Christmas, and in other religions as well, the rebirth of the sun. So in the more pagan religions, you know, in Wicca, for example, it's very nature oriented. It's about literally about that rebirth of the actual physical sun in the sky and things coming to grow again. So that's something to celebrate. And when we talk about the Christian religion, I always think it's a really interesting symbolism that we celebrate the birth of the sun, as in the S-O-N, the Son of God. I always think there's some relation there between the birth of the sun, the rebirth of the sun in the sky, the literal sun in the sky, our life giver and our life bringer, and the idea of the birth of the Son of God in the Christian religion, which is, of course, what we celebrate at Christmas. And we also put fairy lights up, don't we? We light our houses, we bring nature indoors. And so you've got that merging of all these spiritual traditions. And it's not just Christianity, and it's not just Wicca paganism, it's other religions as well. But we see that sort of merging of some of all this symbolism. For example, we bring trees into our house, Christmas trees. We're celebrating that life will come back. It's always an evergreen tree. Well, it's usually an evergreen tree, a tree that never dies, the leaves never fall. And what do? We celebrate by filling it with lights. So it's lit up. We put lights outside our house sometimes, and you go down a high street, and certainly in London and other cities across England and elsewhere, you will see lights lighting up the dark. It's that promise of hope, it's that promise of new life. So I hope you are going to enjoy this holiday season, whatever you are celebrating. It's a time for giving gifts as well, isn't it? Often can feel stressful because there's a lot of sort of marketing around Christmas, that we have to have the perfect Christmas, and we have to have this, and we have to have that, and we have to have lots of gifts, which means we have to have money, and that's been quite difficult for some people. So I wish for you a peaceful Christmas that really honors your traditions, and those traditions that are important to you, to your community, to your religion, to your families, for example. And it's a time of peace and joy, and not a time of stress. So you can probably help a little bit by looking at the chart for the solstice. So I'm going to put the chart up now and talk about that, and then maybe give you some ideas. So here's the chart for the solstice. So it's when the sun moves into 0 degrees of Capricorn. As you can see, 22nd of December at 3:27 a.m. for London. I always set the chart for London because that's where I live, and it just by default it comes up, and I've got to set it somewhere. So you can kind of dismiss the houses here, but it's in house 2 for the chart for London. If you want to know where the solstice falls in your birth chart, you can look up your birth chart on aleb.com or astro.com. You can get a free birth chart there, and wherever 0 Capricorn falls in your chart, whichever house it is where you will feel the influence of the sun moving into Capricorn, feel the influence of the solstice. It'll be the same every year, of course, because your chart doesn't change. So you can also think back about, how do you feel at this time of year? Whenever we're coming up to the holiday, if you are celebrating a holiday at this time, of course, when we're coming up to this time where you might be a little bit tired, a little bit exhausted, because it's the end of the year, the end of the calendar year anyway. So there's also, I have a video where I talk about the themes for each of the houses. So I'll put the link to that in the description. So if you want to look up what area of life the houses, of course, are areas of life. But without due delay, let's talk about this winter solstice or summer solstice. The chart position, the planet positions are going to be the same wherever you live in the world. It's just the houses that will be different. So the sun moves into Capricorn, conjunct Mercury, retrograde, also in Capricorn. Now, overall, it's a very earthy chart. So we have Sun in Capricorn, Mercury in Capricorn. We move along the houses. We've got Pluto in Capricorn. Then we go to the moon, newly in Taurus, conjunct Jupiter in Taurus. And then we go to house 7, and we've got Uranus in Taurus. Sedna in Taurus as well, but I always put some of these minor dwarf planets in my charts just to sort of track what they're doing. I'm not going to talk about them today, but we've got a very earthy chart there, haven't we? Particularly in the signs of Taurus and Capricorn. So the first thing to think about then is the themes for Earth, for the Earth element for the earth signs. It's basically, it's about being practical and down to earth, reliable. Reliability and dependability are qualities of Capricorn. So you might be thinking at this time of year, where am I reliable? Where am I dependable? Who can I rely on? Who can I depend upon? Excuse any scratching noises in the background. My cat's decided he's going to play. I'm not going to stop him. I don't want to stop my cat playing. So it's all about security and feeling safe and stability. So these might be some themes that are in your mind as you come to the end of the year. Where do I feel safe? Where do I feel secure? What can I do to feel more safe and secure? What can I kind of sort out? With earth signs, the answers are generally practical solutions. So it's a time for being practical. It's a time for kind of good common sense, I guess, for coming up with good common sense solutions and, you know, acting on those. We mustn't forget that the earth signs are all about sensuality as well. So have a cuddle, you know, enjoy food. You know, we've got Moon in Taurus. Moon's strong. Moon loves being in Taurus. It's a time often for indulgence. So we've got Moon, which is about how we nurture and comfort ourselves, including food. And of course, the holidays often revolve around food. And Jupiter is about indulgence, particularly in Taurus. So you might be overindulging. You might be kind of, you know, bodily overindulging, physically overindulging in food or wine or whatever it is your so-called poison. But a little bit, you know, a little bit of what you fancy does you good. But too much of what you fancy probably is going to be too much. But Capricorn is very sensible. So there will always be that kind of Capricorn kind of nagging you and going, oh well, you know, I maybe shouldn't have had all this put in or whatever. But it's also about comfort, material comfort, the earth sign. So it's about feeling comfortable. Time of the year, particularly if you're in the global north and you're having the winter solstice, it's about time of, you know, going into yourself, being with the family. Of course, Capricorn is all about family and family traditions. And I know that sometimes being with family is difficult for many people, so it can be a difficult time. So those are some things to kind of think about. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the chart. As you can see, as I've already mentioned, we've got the Sun in Capricorn conjunct Mercury in Capricorn. Mercury is retrograde. Now, there are a couple of issues really with this Mercury. First of all, Mercury is very close to the Sun. So that means that Mercury can't really operate to the best of its ability. It's kind of overshadowed by the Sun, overpowered. So Mercury lacks energy. Mercury is the planet of communication, opinions, mindset, thoughts, ideas. Okay, so there might be some confusion there. There might be some confusion there. There is a very wide square to Neptune for this Sun Mercury conjunction. It also brings in that Mars in Sagittarius as well. It's quite wide, but there might be some sort of, oh, why can't I say what I want? I'm with my family. I'm a grown up. You know, I'm regressing into sort of childhood and those childhood traditions, not only the traditions that we love at Christmas, but also those traditions of like who's in charge and who's the boss, because, you know, Capricorn can be about who's the boss here. So it might be difficult to gain objectivity and logical thinking logically. That it's in Capricorn, that kind of helps. The fact that Mercury is retrograde is also the fact that regression. A lot of people are sort of during the holiday period, if they do spend time with their family, especially adults going to see their family, they do feel like they regress into childhood. So that's another thing that we might experience, or we might be thinking about, or fearing, or worrying about at this time. So a lot of that could be about projection. You know, you're projecting your ideas onto other people and expecting them to behave in certain ways, which really you're not owning your own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. It's not about really kind of pushing your thoughts and ideas on each other. It's about really being steady and calm with your emotions, trying to be matter of fact. You can see the blue line there connecting that Moon Jupiter, okay, in a Taurus. Taurus asks you to be steady, to be calm, to pace yourself. I've talked already about that moon Jupiter, about being overindulgent, but to pace yourselves and just to make yourself as comfortable as possible and make other people comfort. Take into account the opinions of others, but you don't have to take them on board. If someone says to you, oh, blah, 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 I think this is, you're watching TV and, oh, this is a load of rubbish and it's your favorite program. Don't go, oh, it's not a load of rubbish. This is my program. I've been waiting for this all Christmas. It's the only one I want to watch. Say, okay, I don't share your opinion, but thank you for sharing it. Or, okay, that's interesting. Actually not trying to get into an argument with anyone. It could also be about feeling unheard. As I said, Mercury is taken over by the sun here in this chart. It's also retrograde, so it lacks power. So you might feel there's more dominant people in your life. Just generally, we're not just talking about family and the holiday season. We're talking about more generally. The other thing to note about the solstice chart is a solstice chart. We're obviously talking here about the period from the 21st to the 22nd of December and onwards, and a week or so onwards, because obviously these aspects move quite quickly. But we can also take the solstice chart as some of the themes for the coming 3 months as well. So we're looking at the smaller picture, but we're also looking at the bigger picture as well. But mostly we're concentrating on the smaller picture here, but you might find some of the themes might carry through, particularly if the solstice or any of the major planets in this solstice, major aspects in this solstice that I'm talking about are, are very close. If you've got something in your chart at 0 of Capricorn, for example, then every year you will have the sun's transit to that planet or that angle, for example. So you will see themes that will come through. And then the other moving thing, the other things that aren't the same every year. Everything else apart from the sun at 0 Capricorn for the solstice isn't the same every year. So you might be having a Uranus transit, for example, 19 degrees at Taurus. So those are things to think about. So those are kind of longer term transits when you're thinking about Uranus or any of the outer planets, of course. So you will have, so if you're thinking Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in this solstice chart is making strong transits to your own planets. And again, you can look at your chart. You can get a free chart online. You can probably get a free interpretation chart as well for your transits, or you can buy a paid for report or consult a professional astrologer if you want to get your kind of year ahead report, your year ahead transits and what the themes are. But the themes are very much going to be continuing. As I said, if you've got any of those outer planets that I've just mentioned, making very strong connections to your birth chart. So we can look more widely then at this for being sort of for a few months ahead, as well as just for this few days around or just after the solstice. So what else have we got in this chart? Well, as I've already mentioned, we have a helpful trine from Mercury and the sun to that moon in Jupiter. I've already mentioned that the moon is strong in Taurus. It likes being in Taurus. In traditional astrology, there's a thing, there's a thing called essential dignity. I won't go into the technicalities, but there are signs where certain planets and the sun and moon are strong and can operate well, and others where it's more difficult. The moon, thankfully, in this solstice chart is strong and it's in a trine to the sun. So when it's in a trine to the sun, there is that potential there is that promise that your needs and your desires will be met or can be met. It might mean putting your ego aside, or putting, or the egos of others might have an effect on you there. But it's about really, it's about really being matter of fact and practical about things at the moment. Put yourself in your comfort zone as well as much as you can. Remember, for many of us, it's a holiday. Holidays are there to share joy with other people, but they're also there for us to rest. So that moon in Taurus is a really good aspect for that, for putting ourselves in our comfort zone and to rest up. Because next year we have got Pluto going into Aquarius. So we've got some big changes in the sky happening. We've already had a taste of that. So that trine is going to help. It's going to help with the pragmatism. It's going to help us to perhaps overcome a little bit of that confused Mercury in Capricorn that's going backwards. It's with the sun that has a wide aspect to Neptune, which can blur things and blur our mind. So it'll help us with our focus, hopefully, help us just to be pragmatic about anything that's going on around us. And I'm in situations at the moment where all the things that are challenging for me at the moment, most of them have practical solutions. It's just a case of me acting on those practical solutions and solving them. So there's also a sextile, another nice aspect to the solstice, to that sun and Mercury, which is Saturn. You can see in the chart in the 4th house in Pisces. A sextile is an opportunity. It's another soft and easier aspect. You know, we talk about squares and opposition as being challenging. This is a softer and easier aspect, the sextile between the Sun, Mercury, and Saturn. Saturn, of course, rules Capricorn, so it gives extra strength. Saturn, of course, is in Pisces, so you can work on perhaps the things that you might fear. So perhaps you fear with Saturn in Capricorn, Saturn in Pisces, sorry. Perhaps you might have fears around things disintegrating or dissolving or feeling disenchanted. It's an enchanting time of the year, isn't it, the holiday period? Or at least we're expecting it to be. And sometimes we can put so much idealism, so much hope that everything's got to be magic and that spirit of the season that we can feel a little bit disappointed. So there is that kind of fear there. But because it's a sextile, it means we can kind of go with the flow a little bit more easily. We can kind of maybe put our fears to one side for a little while, you know, fearing that instability that we've talked about with all this earthy stuff that's going on in this chart, that again, taking practical action. Saturn is definitely, and Capricorn definitely our planets. So I want you to take action. I want you to sort of work on any problems or issues come up. And that Saturn sextile, this solstice, is good for giving you the solutions, for helping you to take the opportunity to see the solutions. We might have to wait until Mercury has gone forward again, but we will get there. So this is another happy promise for this solstice chart. As I've already mentioned, I mentioned just a little bit more about this very wide square from Neptune to Sun and Mercury, and also to Mars in Sagittarius. There, it kind of pulls that Mars in Sagittarius, which is just ahead of the Sun in house 2. It kind of pulls that in. So spiritual, so it could be a very spiritual time of year for many of you, whether that's religiously spiritual or, you know, just more generally spiritual. It's often has that spiritual feeling to it, and romantic as well. All about yearning. The planet Neptune is all about what we yearn for, yearning for something better. So perhaps we're yearning for something better in the new year or in the next 3 months. What is that? You know, and glamour and charisma as well, especially, you know, charisma and glamour. Glamour is really something for Neptune. And at this time of year, there's lots of glamour, there's lots of illusion, the illusion of the pretty Christmas lights. You know, illusion can be pretty, can be gorgeous, so long as we don't take it at face value. Remember all that earthy stuff. See things for what they are, but enjoy them. You know, there's that ego dissolve as well. That might be that tension in that square, might be that ego dissolve. You might have to dissolve your ego and let your ego go a little bit at this time, which might be difficult, but it might be something that you need to think about. A couple more things to mention. Venus in Scorpio in this chart is in the 1st house, and it is in an opposition to Uranus in this chart in the 7th house. So you've got a fixed opposition in Scorpio and in Taurus. So this isn't really that easy. I've talked in the last two videos at length about Venus in Scorpio. Venus in Scorpio fears rejection. It's passionate. It gets attached. It's about attachment. It can be possessive. It can be jealous. It has very strong and fierce emotions. It's passionate. The feelings run deep. Can be power plays. I've talked all about some of these themes. And the reason I might be sounding negative, because there's some great stuff that you can do with Venus in Scorpio. Some really good stuff about, really committing passionately to something. Watch back on those videos because I don't want to kind of repeat myself a third time on that. But it's a challenge really that it's in this chart in opposition to Uranus here. Venus in Scorpio wants commitment and loyalty. Uranus might bring some rejection. Uranus wants space and freedom, which comes up against our need, wherever our need is, for an intense connection in anything, psychologically or with other people or anything that we are attached to. It brings that challenge of things can kind of, surprises, shocks, things can kind of break down, split up. It might be for the best. It might be something that you are looking for, but it's an opposition. So think about relationships at this time. That might be one of the difficulties, but please don't forget a lot of the positive things I've talked about for this chart, which is the focus on the earth signs, practicality, practical solutions, pragmatism, realism. If anything, Capricorn is good for seeing things as they are real. Comfort, security, taking hope from the trine and the sextile that I've talked about here. One more thing as well is Mars. I haven't put a circle around this, but that Mars there in the second house is in a sesquiquadrate aspect to Jupiter. So Mars is in Sagittarius. Don't forget Mercury is retrograde. So you might put your hoof in it, you might put your foot in it. Be careful what you say, be careful the words that you say, particularly when you're feeling a little bit riled or potentially a little bit angry. You may find that you need to breathe and ground. Grounding is a great practice actually for Capricorn and for Taurus, which is the dominant signs for this solstice chart. Ground your feet, do anything that's grounding. If you start to feel a little bit stressed at this time of year, have a salt bath. Focus your feet on the ground, go out in nature, go for a walk, get some fresh air, eat some root vegetables, anything that kind of grounds you is going to be really helpful at this time. Restraint and composure in relationships. This will help you. Breathing as well. Breathing is very grounding and centering into your heart. So if you're feeling a little bit riled, a little bit stressed, a little bit upset, or you might have some anger rising, or you might feel like you're going to say something you might regret, because Mars in Sagittarius will kind of, I'm really honest, I'm so honest. And with Jupiter as well, that sesquiquadrate from Mars to Jupiter is also about honesty. A lot of Taurians, for example, they'll say, I'm really honest and I'm going to tell you what it like it is. So think about, before you act and react in that kind of way, if it's not genuinely helpful and practical, if it's not genuinely welcome, take a breath, breathe into your heart, particularly around this solstice, always, but around this solstice, what is the sun? It's about your heart, isn't it? The sun is your heart of our solar system. It's the heart of our chart. It's our heart physically as well. Symbolically, it symbolizes the physical heart. Breathe into your heart space, ground yourself, take yourself out. Think about restraint and composure. These are very Capricornian things as well. Before you kind of, blow up or say any insensitive comments, remember to be tolerant. And really, I really hope that you can take hope from much of this that I've talked about. There are some fantastic aspects here in this chart. We might be in for, let's just say, some adventures next year. So please take this time if you can, if you are celebrating a holiday or just taking a rest at this time of year during the solstice. Go for comfort, go for tolerance, go for just try and enjoy yourself. One final thing that I will tell you about Capricorn and the earth signs in general is they have a wonderful sense of humor, that kind of dry sense of humor. So try and see the humor in things as well. As always, I thank you so much for watching. I thank you so much for subscribing. I think I've got 97 subscribers at the moment, and this is still a fairly new YouTube channel. I would love to have 100 subscribers. That would be a great Christmas present for me. And by the way, it's my birthday on Christmas Day, so it would be a great birthday present for me. I thank you so much with all my heart, with all my Capricorn Sun heart, sending much love for this season, and I hope it brings you joy. Lots of love. Goodbye.